All right, we got ourselves a lens on how to upgrade the engagement level of your audience. And we're going to talk today about how to use a dialogue and what the effect of that is with the attention, with the from your audience, right? How can you see them engaged all the time, taking notes, and then at the end say yes to whatever you say is the next step that makes sense for them. So, in order for us to understand it, I would love to tell a story, something that you don't know yet about me, and I'm gonna do it in two different ways. And you're gonna experience what the difference is for you, how you experience it, and what you feel is getting you centered in. Okay? You ready? All right. So, what you don't know about me yet, probably, because I didn't tell you before, is that I worked in a supermarket. I was actually pretty damn passionate about it. I worked there for 5 years, and I started when I was 16 doing like the scanning part. Like I was the cashier behind the counter, scanning the bananas, the apples, the toilet paper, but also the alcohol, beers, wine, booze, all of it. And a rule in the Netherlands at that time was that people under 18 are not able to drink alcohol, and people who are 25 or younger have to show their ID. It's mandatory. Now, in order to control that, there was this rule that I have to ask the ID from everybody I think is 25 or younger. If I don't ask it to someone who is 24, I'm not doing my job, even though they can drink alcohol. Get it? So, as a 16-year-old, I was scanning these things, and at some point there's a guy. He has a 6-pack of beer, so I'm scanning it. I look at his head. I'm thinking, I think he's 18. I'm sure he's 18, but I don't think he's 25 yet, which means I have to ask his ID. But I have to tell you, when you're 16 years old, you're not that comfortable, not that confident. You're scanning these things, and there's a guy who's looking quite authoritative. He's like muscular, he's looking at his wallet, he's already checking his phone, blah, 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 super cool. He just wants to buy a 6-pack. And you ask, and they didn't bring it with them. They get really angry. So it's not fun to ask it to someone who's 26. So I'm thinking by myself, should I ask? Should I not? Should I ask? Should I not? Because if I don't ask, I might have the consequences, which is that when the store, because this is actually a real thing, by the way, they send actors, and then when the cashier doesn't check their ID and it's under 25, the store gets a fine. If that happens 3 times, you're not allowed to sell alcohol anymore. So this is a really big thing. There's a lot of consequences. And I decide in that moment, you know what? He's probably 25.3, and I just scan it and I give it away. And for the whole entire day, I'm thinking by myself, but what if it's 24? And I cause the store a problem. I should have spoken up. Do you recognize? Is there any scenario that pops into your mind where you knew you had to speak up, but you didn't because you were afraid? At the end of my shift, my boss comes to me. He never does, so I was like, oh no. And he said, Lori, we did an internal check. And my thought immediately went like, that must have been that guy. And it was. There was no fine because it was an internal control. But the feeling I had there was not worth the uncomfort of speaking up. The blame that I felt, the eyes in my boss's head when he said, Lori, why didn't you just ask? And I had to say I was scared. It was not worth that moment of uncertainty. That's one way of telling that story. And then I would continue, because now we're experiencing the pain. Now we go to the opportunity. You see? So let me try to tell the story in a different way. It's harder for me because I've been practicing on the other version so often that I almost cannot go back. But let's try it, okay? So what you probably don't know about me is that I was a cashier in a supermarket, which basically means that I was scanning products. I was scanning products, bananas, apples, toilet paper, and beer and wine, alcohol. And one day there came a man and he bought 6 cans of beer. And it's really hard for me to do this, as you should see. And I didn't ask his ID, even though I was doubting if he was old enough. And I didn't. He bought the beer, and afterwards my boss came to me. And my boss told me that was not great, because it was an actor, and if this would be a real control, we would have been fined as a supermarket. Now he asked me why I didn't ask that. And then I responded saying that I was afraid. Now who else has been afraid and is done sitting on the consequences that are actually not yours if you would just have spoken up? Now, the difference of those two scenarios is that the first story we were experiencing like it's happening now. I was time traveling back to that moment, and I was telling it like I was the cashier in that moment. I was showing you what I was seeing, what I was hearing, what I was feeling by having a dialogue. The second version is more descriptive. It's more generalized. It's more like, not that you're time traveling to the moment and experiencing like it's happening, but you're actually talking about a memory, like a photo you took of the past, you put it on the wall and you're describing what you're seeing. Now, the way that the brain works, and we already talked about this, is when people see, feel, hear, and experiencing it like it's their own experience, the brain doesn't know what's real or not. So when we are engaged, when we're having a dialogue, our brain experiencing like it's really happening. And it's probably connecting with past memories who are quite similar, especially why I raised my hand and asking who else has ever experienced something like this before. So you're even connecting it to something else, to their own experience. While the second version is more something that they see and acknowledge, if I tell it in a very extreme way, right? And the way where people feel most ignited, most engaged, is from the first one based on brain science. Now, the funniest part is that I also tested this in group programs I hold. And I asked this to the group. And I did an experiment and I said, which one resonates with you more? Now, 95% of the people said the first version resonated with them more. Only 5% said the second. Right? So everybody's different. Everybody has their own way of absorbing information. If I understand how the brain works, and if I understand my own experiments, then I would highly suggest for you to include dialogues in your presentations. Now, this is something that requires practice. What I said, I practiced so many times that I actually had a little struggle with the second one. And what I want to tell you with this is it doesn't need to be perfect. If you look at mine, they are not perfect, but the imperfection creates the authenticity. The realness creates the connection. Every time I tell this story, I tell it in a different way, but you get the sense, it's in a dialogue, you have the conversation, you really experience the thoughts that people are saying out loud. I was thinking by myself, I thought, I'm thinking. and you share those thoughts like you're experiencing them now, so your audience is experiencing them now. Make sense? So you're going to practice this. You're going to include a dialogue in your story. Again, this is a practice. All these lenses, all these engagement lenses, they compound, okay? So when you just add a little bit of dialogue, and then you do a little bit of another lens, and a little bit of another lens, and a little bit of another lens, at some point your whole talk has so many engagement loops, engagement igniting moments, that your audience is way more active with you. And that is what you want. So start to play around with it. Start to experience like you're time traveling back to the moment and bring people along in this emotional roller coaster, this magical ride, this transformational experience. Enjoy.